Chapter 9: Personal Development. When I hired Lori Lewin as our Executive Vice President in 1978, we had about 55 maternity stores and had not yet started the Additionnel division. Within days of his joining us, I left on my 2-week trip to Israel and left Lori in charge. A week after I returned from Israel, I again left for a 2-week buying trip to Europe. When I returned from that trip, I spent 7 weeks with my father in the hospital and a week sitting Shiva after his death. So I had been away from the office for 13 weeks. I knew that Lori had made some staff changes during my absence, but it was only when I came back that I became aware of the extent of those changes. Lori had replaced most of our senior people with people who had been part of his team at MIA Fashions. Lori was a very strong and assertive executive, and given that he had many of his people strategically placed in most key positions, he was effectively in control. In no time, Lori and I began to butt heads. Not only did he take charge of what I had hired him to do, help me run the company, he took over completely. I felt shut out and like a stranger in my own company. As each month passed, I felt more and more displaced and inept. I kept backing off, and the weaker I showed myself to be, the stronger Lori became. It was clear to everyone who was in charge. Finally, I decided that I had lost control and that there was no way I could get it back. The best thing I could do was try to sell the company and salvage whatever I could. So I went to the managing partner of our accounting firm and asked him to help me find a buyer. After making that decision, I took a week's holiday with Shirley at a Club Med in Haiti. One afternoon, I was sitting on the beach chatting with Ellie Stahl, a woman we had met at the club, and she asked me what I did for a living. I told her about losing control of the company and my decision to sell. I said I did not know what I would do next. After listening to my story, Ellie said, "It seems to me that you are making a very serious decision, and I wonder if you have really thought it through. I recently attended a 2-weekend course called the S Training, which I found very enlightening. I think that course would help you clarify what you are doing and why you are doing it. I really urge you to consider it. There is an evening introductory session you can attend and then decide if you would like to take the course." I told Shirley about my conversation with Ellie, and in light of our positive experience with Marriage Encounter, we both decided to attend the introductory evening session. We also invited our 18-year-old son Philip to join us. The 3 of us registered for the course. A couple of weeks later, along with approximately 300 other participants, we attended the 2-weekend program. At that time, the training was offered by the EST organization, which was headquartered in California. Several years later, EST became Landmark Education, and the course was replaced by the Landmark Forum. Landmark Education today offers personal development programs in 26 countries and is considered to be the largest off-campus educational institution in the world. Of all the times my guardian angel has directed me, none was more significant than her arranging for that chance encounter with Ellie Stahl, because the S training turned out to be the single most important and powerful experience of my life. For me, the experience was transformational, and I can say unequivocally it was a turning point in my life. I now look at my life as before and after the training. The S Training, the Forum. The S Training was designed to help participants achieve a new level of self-awareness and live a life that works. It teaches you to expand your awareness moment by moment and empowers you to become an observer in your own life. It is as if you become 2 people, one the actor or the doer, the other the observer. When you can actually observe yourself in play in your life, you can identify those behaviors that are not contributing to you and change them. The ability to be an observer in your life gives you the power to create and live a life that works. The training started me on a journey of exploration and self-discovery. I became intrigued with the sources of personal power, both in the context of one's own life and in the context of large organizations. That program inspired me to take many more advanced landmark courses over the next 10 years, and it was through them that I came to understand more about who I was, what was driving me, and how I behaved, reacted, and responded to life's events. From all that work, I became empowered to such an extent that over time, it was as if I had become a new person. The training gave me new insights into how we live as human beings and how we can live with much more control and power. Now let me explain using responsibility as an example. Before taking the training, my idea of the meaning of responsibility was to embrace, take care of, and handle my obligations. I had to do the right thing, I had to look after my family, earn a living, obey the law, etc. In short, I was like most people, a responsible citizen. However, the training gave me new meanings, new distinctions for responsibility. I expanded my understanding and embraced responsibility in a much more powerful way. I began to see myself as the cause of everything that affects my life. I understood that I am not responsible for events and circumstances that I do not create and over which I have no control. However, I came to understand that I am the creator of and responsible for the interpretations and meanings I apply to those events and circumstances. The weather is a good example. If I look out the window on a rainy day, I can say, "Woe is me, another miserable, rainy, dismal day." That's one interpretation I can apply, or I can take responsibility for my well-being and apply another interpretation. I can say, "Thank God for the rain. It's going to make everything green and lush. I love this time of year." The first interpretation does not make me feel good and does not contribute to my well-being. On the other hand, the second interpretation does. Put another way, although I have no control over the weather, I can take responsibility and control how I allow the weather to affect me. So, my quality of life is affected more by the interpretations and meanings I apply to events and circumstances than by the events and circumstances themselves. And if the interpretations and meanings I apply to events and circumstances do not contribute to my well-being, inasmuch as they are my creations and I had the power to create them in the first place, then I also have the power to change them. I can create them another way so they do contribute to my well-being. In summary, my new distinctions for and my broadened understanding of responsibility gave me both power and some control over my quality of life. My eyes were open to the fact that I had not taken responsibility and that I had not managed that in the past. I had lived my life as a victim of events and circumstances. Closure. A case in point was my troubled relationship with my father. I had taken no responsibility for the breakdown in our relationship. Indeed, I blamed him and held him responsible for everything that had gone wrong between us. I felt that he had been unfair to me and had judged me wrongly over several important family issues. I was deeply hurt and very angry. I loved my dad dearly. I had enormous respect for him, and I always had sought his approval, but it seemed to me that I could never get it. When my father died, I remember standing over his grave as they lowered his coffin into the ground, and in my grief I mumbled under my breath, "How could you have done this to us? With all your wisdom, how could you have been so blind?" I carried that blame and anger with me for another 3 years until I took the training. Around 2 a.m. on the third day of the training, I had a breakthrough. I was sitting in the course room very tired and not consciously listening. My defenses were down. A man who had been sitting a couple of rows behind me stood up, took the microphone, and began sharing. "I have been sitting here thinking about my relationship with my father," he said, "and I see that I have not been a good son. I have never allowed myself to understand or see my father's point of view. I have taken no responsibility for our relationship and have been blaming him for all that is wrong between us." Those words caught my attention, burned into my foggy mind, and I thought, "Oh my God, that's exactly how I have been with my own dad." I realized I too had not considered his point of view, his needs, his fears, or whatever was driving him. I had been totally blind to my responsibility in the breakdown, and I had not taken responsibility for the relationship. I saw that as much as anything else, it was my interpretation of what my dad said and did that had contributed to the breakdown. At that moment, I took responsibility for our relationship, and it was transformed forever. A few days later, I went to the cemetery, stood over my dad's grave, and said, "Rest in peace, my dear father." The anger and hurt were gone. Even though I could not talk it out with him in person, I took responsibility for my part in the matter, and what is left now is only love and understanding. I now have a great relationship with my father, and I contribute that result entirely to my new distinction for responsibility. Taking back the company. Before I took the training, I was having an ongoing argument with Laurie Lewin over a project that he wanted to put into place, but which I felt was inappropriate. However, he just kept moving ahead with his plan. On the Monday after I had completed the training, Laurie and I attended our regular Monday afternoon management meeting with about 20 managers from different departments to review the previous week's sales, discuss strategies, and make decisions on appropriate actions. The meeting was in Laurie's office, which happened to be a large corner office overlooking the parking lot. He was chairing the meeting, and I was one of the attendees. The first order of business was to put his plan, with which I did not agree, on the table for final polishing. When he introduced the topic for discussion, I said, "Laurie, we're not going forward with this plan." Our exchange then went something like this: "What are you talking about? We've put weeks of work into this and we're ready to move forward." "I know, and I'm sorry about that, but you know I've never agreed with this plan. It is a wrong strategy, I don't believe in it, and I cannot allow it to go ahead." "I don't have to put up with this. We agreed on this and we're going ahead." "No, we are not." "You're right. You don't have to put up with this. That's your decision, but we are not going ahead with this plan." Everyone in the room was dumbstruck. They had never seen me go up against Laurie before. He said, "Okay." Then he got up, put his briefcase on his desk, stuffed it with a bunch of papers, put on his jacket, picked up his briefcase, and walked out. He had to pass his office windows to get to his car, which was parked right outside his office. There was absolute silence in the room while everyone watched him take out his key and put it in the car door. He stood there for a few seconds, then he pulled out the key, turned around, and came back into his office. He put his briefcase down on his desk and said, "Well, I guess we're not going ahead with that project." At that moment, I had my company back. Before taking the training, I had been intimidated by Lori, and as the CEO, I was not living up to my responsibilities to lead the company. Out of the training, I became empowered and I was no longer intimidated, and I assumed my proper role as leader. In retrospect, it is clear that I had not yet developed many management skills. I should not have confronted Lori as I did in front of the entire team that included people who reported to him. I should have handled the matter with him one-on-one before the meeting. It was very lucky for me that he turned around and came back because Lori was a great asset at Shermax. After that, we worked fabulously well together for the next several years. Then one day, Lori received an offer from a company in the UK, which he felt he could not pass up, and he left Shermax. We kept in touch while he was in England. Eventually, he returned to Canada and has had a very successful career as the president and CEO of Licenza Corp. I have enormous respect for Lori and what he has accomplished. The episode with Lori and my revelation about my relationship with my father are only two examples of how my life changed and how I became empowered as a result of taking the training. My whole way of thinking changed. The way I looked at the world and how I allow events and circumstances to affect me changed. The way I interpret events and circumstances changed. The judgments that I brought to events and circumstances changed. The fundamental change was that I no longer lived my life as a disempowered victim. I began to operate from strength and with personal power.